All right, so I want to thank everybody, all the Salt Talk participants tonight. As we begin, this is the final session for our fall series. Just to let you know, we'll be kicking it back off in January 2025. I don't know. I that just seems amazing. It will be 10 years for SALT in the Montgomery, Greene, and Warren areas, longer in the Butler County, but it's hard to believe it's been 10 years, even so, since I took over some of the SALT talks. But I want to welcome you all tonight. My name is Patty Schramm. I'm the Parent Resource Coordinator Trainer for the SALT talks. Um, so this month we were looking at the decisions we had to make post high school decisions. When your child's going through that transition, what decisions are going to be what are we going to be facing, possible things to think about. So we started off in September looking at the transition piece, writing the IEP, how to prepare for that high school to adulthood transition. What kind of things do we have to prepare for? Project Life, Project Search. We talked with OOD about preparing the IEP for employment or post-secondary education. And then this month in October, we looked at transportation. We looked at just some of the different things we face with, post-secondary college. We talked to a few of the schools. So now tonight we have Christy Ross here. She is with Butler County Board of Developmental Disabilities, and she's going to talk about housing. What does living on their own? What does that look like? What should our children know? Our young adults, I should say, know when they are looking at going into housing. Is there a preparation? What are all the things that come into play when you are trying to decide about this huge step? I mean, we're deciding on, do they leave the home, do they not leave the home, and then your child is like, do I want to leave mom and dad? Yes I do, no I don't. There's so many things that go in to play with housing, that other step. Not only employment are we looking at, possibly a post education or whatever, but then we also have to look at living arrangements and housing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Christy Ross, and she is aware that, there's multiple families on here from various counties. So if you have a specific question that maybe is more related to your county, I mean, ask your question in the chat. If we can direct you, if someone's here from another county board, you can type a contact information in the, as we're going through, you can type that contact information in the chat if you'd like. But we just wanted some general guidelines on, this whole housing decision. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Christy, and your co-host, so you can share your screen.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry, I hopped off for a minute. The sun was setting and it was just beaming on my face, so I shut the blind. So I'm back. Well, my name is Christy Ross, and like Patty said, I work with Butler County excuse me, DD. I've worked for the county for 16 years. The first 14 years, I was an adult SSA. So once your kids, children, young adults transferred, no, I shouldn't say transferred, transitioned out of school and kind of started that next phase of their life, that's where I picked up and then worked with them on throughout their years. So I myself am still learning a lot of this, the transition, the school, project search, project life. So I myself am still learning all those few things the past couple years since I've transitioned to this new role. So tonight, I think housing, we're just going to keep it kind of basic. Like Patty said, this is kind of an overall housing 101, kind of some thinking topics, things like that. Just remember each county does operate differently. So I'm speaking more on the Butler County, how we think, how we process things. Whichever county you may live in, if it's not Butler, may be a little different. So, and with that, we will get started. As you will see me bouncing around. Okay. And I tend to talk a little fast. So if what I say doesn't make sense or you have a question, please get my attention. Or if Patty, if you can let me know if somebody put something in the chat, I don't have a problem stopping and going over what's right there in your mind. So, okay. So I think the biggest misunderstanding is a lot of people think that Butler County DD has homes just lined up throughout the county for people. Um, we do not own housing for people to move into. Most of the people who live in the community rent from a landlord just like you and I would. There are some people who live in a home that the family has purchased, and that's a whole other situation, things that we look at. And then there are a few people who've purchased their own home. There's not a lot, but there is a small percentage of folks who have the funds or the means to purchase their own home. But I would say most of the people that we serve who live in the community, if they don't live at home with family, they're renting from a private landlord. The first steps that we look at when we think, hey, it's that time, we kind of need to start having these conversations and future plan. Number one, it's always going to come down to money, just like everything else in life. We're all fully aware of how uncomfortable, I'll say, I don't even know if that's the right word, how hard it is right now with rent. So the first thing we look at is how much income do I have a month? Does your child receive Social Security? And if so, how much is that? Do they plan on working? If so, how many hours? Are they going to have both? Are they going to have Social Security and work? So those are kind of the things that we're looking at because there is no funding that will pay for rent, utilities, food, anything like that through the county board. So when someone is ready to move out or look at moving out, we're looking at your income a month because that's what you have to live off of. So we'll keep it basic numbers. If your Social Security is only $900 a month, with the way rental prices are today, it might be kind of hard to live on your own. And we'll get into that a little bit more here soon as well. So that's the number one question that we're always going to start with is what's your budget? What's your income? The next step is how do I find housing? You are more than welcome to find housing on your own. If you know somebody or have a relationship with someone, or just you purely find it a street on the road for rent, you can find one that way. Do you know someone you want to live with? Is it someone you went to school with or a neighbor and you guys get along pretty well? Do the two of you or possibly three of you want to move in together? Are you looking for a roommate? So you don't know anybody. Um, so we have other individuals that are also looking for roommates. So, we may reach out and say, hey, well, we know this person. Would you guys like to meet? And I kind of relate that to dating. So through that process, you guys would meet, hang out, go to dinners, go to movies, and that would just build to spending more and more time together to say, hey, do you want to move in with me? Do you think this could work? And then of course, someone moving out for the first time as well. So there's a multiple ways to try and find housing that we work with. Where can I live? Just like you and I, your young one can live anywhere that they want. They can live in apartments, condos, houses, again, rent or own. The biggest things to think about when you're looking at homes is maintenance. Who takes care of things that go out? So if you're owning a home, that's always a big one that I think about. Who's going to replace that roof? Who's going to replace the air conditioner, the furnace? So those are topics that we bring up through these conversations, especially a lot of times when a family member will say, hey, well, what if I purchased a house? So those are all things that we have to work on. And some parents will say, well, what if we help supplement? And I say, that's great for now, but always try and remember that sadly, you're not always going to be here. So when you're not here to help supplement that income anymore, who then will be able to help out? Because again, there is no funding through DD that will help with those things. So if the person can't afford where they're living without that supplemental income, sadly, we will have to look at moving them to a place that they could afford. Um, so that's always just something to keep in the back of your mind too, as you're making those future plans or having those discussions. So along with maintenance, cutting grass, shoveling snow, all those typical things. Um, so if you're renting, it's asking your landlord, do they take care of that? Do they charge a fee for that? Or does that fall on you? A lot of parents and individuals, well, do I have to be independent or do I have to know certain things to move out? You don't. I think our goal, no matter where you are in life, is to be as independent as what you can. And we all know that some people are further along and have more capabilities than others. So what we say is, what are some life skills you can work on to kind of prepare yourself for this? Can you do your own laundry? Again, you don't have to do every task, but do you know how to separate your laundry? Can you load the washer? Can you put in the soap? So again, it's not knowing how to do it from beginning to end, but can you do any part of that task? And if you can't, that's great. We'll figure out ways to help you get that done. Cleaning your home and apartment. I know a lot of kids are, I live at home. I don't have to clean because mom or dad or sister or someone else does that. Well, guess what? You move out, nobody else is going to do that for you. So what can you do to help participate and keep your home clean? Cooking. What parts of cooking can you do? Can you use a microwave? Can you use a stove? Can you read a recipe? Can you gather ingredients from the refrigerator? Taking a shower or taking a bath. Do you know how the temperature gauge works on the faucets? Can you move the shower head if needed? Do you need safety bars to get in and out or a mat on the floor? So those are all kind of things that we're going to talk about through that process and that you're going to work with your SSA about. Some other life skills to work on or think about, managing your money. Do you have a checking account? Do you have a savings account? If you do you know anything about it? And a lot of people don't, let's just be honest. And it's, do you want to learn about it? Or do we need to get someone to help you? And that will come further down the road as well. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Can you make a transaction at the store? So say it's a week's worth of groceries. Can you handle that on your own? Or can it even be a short trip to the gas station? Can you buy a snack and a bottle of water? And if you can't, what can we help you out with, or what skills can you do? Can you make a grocery list? Do you know what items you want? If you're meal prepping for the week, do you know what items you need to have in the house, to make those recipes? And can you find them all in the grocery store? Can you access them in the grocery store? On the shelves, can you get that yourself or do you need assistance? So it's all those little basic things that are going to come out in this process as we go along. And then we have safety skills, because you're living out on your own. You have to have, be able to keep yourself safe as well. Do you know how to call 911? Do you know what to do in case of a thunderstorm, tornado watches, fire safety? Can you answer the door safely, answer the phone safely? And then as well as self-medicate. Do you know the name of your medications? Do you know what medication you why you take that medication? Do you know what time you take those medications? And again, you don't have to know the full step from beginning to end. If you know any step, that's great. And if you don't, that's fine as well. We'll do what we need to do to kind of help gain as much skills and independence as you can. The biggest question is, can I live on my own? As we went to the third slide, the biggest thing it's going to come down to is budget. The current rent for a one-bedroom apartment is typically starting at $800 a month. And that's $100 more than when I did this presentation last year. So sadly, the prices just continue to rise. And it can go as high as $1,200 a month. Now, again, that's for a 1 bedroom. You can find some bedroom, or I'm sorry, some apartments that are a little bit cheaper than $800 a month. But to be honest, they may not be in the most desirable location. There's probably a reason why it's a little cheaper. But I was looking at apartments for rent in Fairfield for an individual yesterday, and the cheapest I found was $919, but it went as high as $1,900. And again, that's for a 1 bedroom apartment. So unless, you're working a full-time job or have a really good Social Security amount, sadly, most of our individuals aren't going to be able to live on their own anymore. Those days of $500, $600 apartments just aren't there. Who pays for my housing? The individual has to pay for all aspects of housing. Again, there's no funding through Butler County DD that will pay for rent and utilities. Some of your children may have a waiver, or there may have been discussions about a waiver. You'll hear level 1, IO, self. Those are 3 different types of waivers, which is a different conversation than for today. But there is no funding through that waiver that pays for rent or utilities. That waiver pays for if there's staffing and the home needs, transportation back and forth to work, if they need help at work, things like that. There is nothing in regards to the payment of rent, utilities through that waiver that it pays for. There is Butler Metropolitan Housing, aka Section 8, and every county has their own Metropolitan Housing Authority. Here in Butler County, they offer 2 programs, public housing. They manage 17 different apartment complexes, and those complexes are in Hamilton and Middletown. You may hear a lot of people refer to them as high rises. They're the taller buildings, but there are a few smaller apartment complexes throughout the county that they operate. You would apply for public housing online through the Butler Metropolitan Housing website, and it is income-based. And if you move from public housing, so say you were able to get into one of those apartments, but you decide to leave and go into a private landlord situation, you no longer receive that benefit from metropolitan housing. So you have to live in that public housing apartment or another complex that they run to receive that benefit. But currently that application portal is closed. So, and I don't know when that waiting list would reopen up. The second program through Butler Metropolitan Housing is the Housing Choice Voucher. This is what most people refer to as Section 8. Again, you would apply for the Housing Choice Voucher online through Metropolitan Housing. It is also income-based. Once the voucher is awarded, there's an annual redetermination process. If your children have food stamps or Medicaid, it's similar to that process where you have to verify income, address, who lives in the home, those types of things every year. If you should decide to move from that home, say you're renting from a private landlord that accepts that voucher, as long as you go to another landlord that accepts that voucher will follow you. So that's different. So if you're at the public housing apartment and you decide to leave, you no longer receive that benefit. But with the housing choice voucher, if you have one of those, as long as you go to another home that the landlord accepts Section 8, that voucher will follow you. And currently that application portal is closed as well. As of this summer, the number I heard was there were 5,600 people on that current waiting list. So they told me that they do not anticipate that waiting list to open up for at least 5 years, if not longer, because it's such a large amount on that list. What if I need financial assistance? There's food stamps, also referred to as SNAP, to assist with food. If you're not familiar with that process, that's through your local job and family services. For us, that building is in Hamilton. If you're not familiar, it's in the government building. And it's an application and it's income based. As long as your child is 18, so technically an adult, they could apply for that benefit, and only their income would count. They may ask what the total household income is, but it should just refer back to just your child's income. There are some community programs, agencies that assist with utilities. Each program has their own requirements and application process. So there's Self in Hamilton. Um, they offer sometimes rental assistance, assistance with getting air conditioners, utility payments, and most of those, it's an application. And again, it's income based. And a lot of it, they receive grants through the government. So once that funding is done, that program may not be available anymore. Not Self, but with COVID funds, there was a rental assistance program that had a lot of funds attached to it. Once those were depleted, that program was no longer available. So a lot of it is based on what grants that they get as well. And then Duke Energy has the PIT program, which essentially is income based as well. So say your bill is $200 a month, you may only have to pay $90. Now that other $110 does not go away. It just continues to build and build and build. So it's really important that you pay that monthly fee or monthly portion every month, because if you don't, then your entire bill is due. And then if that's a rather large bill, which it may turn into, they can shut you off. Now, Duke Energy isn't everywhere. Like City of Hamilton has their own utilities. So I'm not for sure if they have any assistance programs, but it's something that you could look into in your area wherever he or she may move to. Payee services. So what is a payee? So this kind of bounces back to that whole, can I manage my funds? Do I have a checking account? Do I have a savings account? A payee is a person or an agency who assists you with managing your benefits, and that's Social Security and or your wages. The person or agency must apply to be your payee through Social Security. So that's an application that the individual signs off on saying, yep, I want this person to be my payee. And once that's submitted to Social Security, um, honestly, it varies. I've seen it happen as quick as a month, but I've seen it take as many as 6 months. Honestly, we're at the mercy of Social Security and when they process that application on when those funds are then transferred to the payee. A family member or friend can be your payee. I know a lot of parents make the choice to stay that payee so that way they can kind of monitor what's going on and have that information. There are payee. Yes. Question? Okay. There are payee agencies that charge a monthly fee. There's a Lifespan, which is based out of Hamilton. And I believe I heard their fee is up to now $54 a month. That is a lot, especially when you're only bringing in $900 a month. But there is a couple other agencies that are out there in the county. It doesn't always have to go through Lifespan. And a payee is responsible for paying all of your bills. If the budget allows, they can also send you spending money weekly or monthly. So essentially, say you went with Lifespan, you and your child would meet with them and say, this is how much they get in Social Security month. And then they essentially make the budget, what the rent is, what utilities are. And if there's anything extra at that end of the month, then they can say, hey, we can send you $20 a week, or we can send you $20 a month. So they handle all of those things. Will I have help? Again, when we start having these housing conversations, the SSA and I are going to be having these conversations of what do you need help with? Can a family member help you with that? Or can a natural support help you with some of those things? Can technology help you? You know, there are things out there like Alexa and automatic medication dispensers. There's bed shakers, there's alarms, there's smart appliances. The world has become so technology based that there's a lot of tools out there now that we use um, instead of bringing in a paid staff. So again, as we're having those conversations and assessing your need and how much help you need, those are also going to be conversations that we're going to have. Can a natural support come in? Can a family come in? Or what types of technology can we bring in? A lot of family members and individuals are worried about social inclusion. I'm moving out of the house for the first time. Mom and dad were always taking me here and there and just keeping me real busy. There are other activities in Butler County. There's sports, there's Special Olympics, there's a softball league through Joe Nuxall. Butler County DD has an advocacy group called Speak Up. They meet at our office on Janet Clemens Center on Fair Avenue. I believe it's monthly. So you can go and meet friends and advocate for others. Butler County also puts out a quarterly community connections newsletter. And in that newsletter, it goes over virtual events, in-person events, trainings, parties. So if you're not receiving those and you would like to, you can get in touch with your SSA or you can email me and we'll be sure to put you on that email list so you start seeing those items. Things to remember. The number one is remember services are individualized. A lot of you are very close with other families and peers, and you may hear that, your neighbor next door, well, she's getting this service and this amount of activities going on, and another person at school is getting this. So again, when we're having these conversations with your SSA, it all goes off of the need of your child at that point, your young adult at that point, and what does he or she need at that time. So it's not to say that you won't get that at some point, but maybe it's not a need currently. Or maybe right now you may need more than what those other two people are, and then we address that. So that's the biggest thing to remember is it's individualized and that we focus on what you need at that current time. And remember, each county board has their own processes. Again, I'm speaking on Butler County. Warren County has a completely different, Montgomery County has a completely different process. And each of us address housing and other needs, waivers, things like that in a completely different manner. As far as housing, remember that this process takes time because we don't want to just put your child, your young adult, into a home that we think will fit. We really want to be sure it's a good match because number one, if it's not a good match and you guys say, hey, you can't come back here, we have limited spots and we don't have anywhere else for them to go. So we really want to take our time and be sure that not only is your son or daughter happy, that the potential roommates that they're going to have are also happy with that choice. Now, again, nothing's ever perfect. Living together is hard. But overall, we still want to be sure that it's a good match for everybody involved. So that housing process can take 3 to 6 months, or it can be even longer if we're looking for a roommate, if we don't know somebody that we want to live with. So it just takes time. And that can be frustrating. But just, talk to us about your concerns and we're here to listen and kind of talk it through and explain why maybe there are some hangups or why it's taking so long. Another thing to think about, or how we look at the situation when we're having these conversations is wants versus needs. So when we're sitting with your son or daughter, and we're talking about moving out for the first time, things that you want. So they're looking at, well, I want my own bathroom. The SSA is going to look at, well, that's great, but do you need an accessible bathroom? Do you need bars? Do you need a lower toilet? Do you need some kind of other adaptive equipment? So those are things that SSA is going to be thinking about. Another one is, they want pizza every Friday. Again, that's fantastic if you're able to afford that. But then we're also going to be looking at, Do you need to have it cut into small pieces? Do you have diet restrictions? Those types of things. And then, of course, go to the movies every Saturday. Again, someone to assist in buying your ticket. Are you able to make those small transactions? Are you able to hold on to the ticket? So not only is it what you want, but we're also looking at what do you need through the process. And last, this is my contact information. Again, your SSA is always going to be your main point of contact. I am just one little sliver in this process of a team. But anytime you have any questions or anything like that regarding services, waivers, schools, IEPs, your SSA is always going to be your main point of contact. But you can always reach out to me if you have questions about housing, or any other program that's out there. And I'm always going to loop your SSA back into the picture. And if you ever wanted to have a more further one-on-one discussion about your situation, what your thoughts are, you can reach out to me and or your SSA, and we can schedule a team meeting. And we can do that virtually. We can do that in person. We are flexible for your needs to where we can make that more specific and how we can help you out.
Christy, just a question I had was, does DODD, which is the Ohio um, level for developmental disabilities, it's called DODD. Do they have anything regarding housing and state level, any information on that that maybe a parent could generally look up also?
If you go to the DODD website and check up or look up housing, they do have some resources. It can be a bit confusing because there is a program and it is slipping my mind right now. And it is it's program 811. And it will tell you it's a program through HUD. But that is very specific to certain counties. Like Butler County Metropolitan Housing does not participate in that program. So there are resources out there, but it may not be specific to Butler County.
Okay, yeah, I had thought there was something that they had that they were working on or had available. There
Mhm.
is a question in the chat box. What about companies like Rest Care or Inclusive Housing Resources? They have waiver homes, question mark. How is that different?
Okay, so Inclusive Housing Resources is a housing authority that Butler County DD contracts with. So think of them as a landlord. So they don't provide housing. It's some of our folks rent from them. So that is what that is. So Inclusive Housing Resources, think landlord in your mind. And then places like Res Care or other places like that, there are two different ways. Those are providers, I shouldn't say independent, they're providers. And some of them do provide services in waiver homes. So say Patty and I are living together and each of us have a waiver and we need some staff assistance, whether that be 20 hours a week or whether that be 24 hours a day. We can choose a company like ResCare to come in and work with us. So that is the waiver service. So Patty and I are renting a home in the community. We could be living right beside you, and ResCare comes into Patty and I's home to work with us, but then they leave. So they do not own the home. But then ResCare is a different type of provider who also runs a program called an ICF, an intermittent care facility. So that is not a waiver home. An ICF is a facility that only people with disabilities can live in, and they provide 24 hours a day service. And it's a terrible comparison, and I hate to use it, but just visually so you can think of a nursing home for people with disabilities. Everything is in-house. The doctor comes in-house, the dentist comes in-house. They typically have nursing services there, PT, OT. There are some ICFs that are larger, like say 100 people live in the building. And then like ResCare, for example, runs smaller ICFs that are only 8 beds. So only 8 people live there. And ICFs are statewide. Butler County only has 2. If you were looking for an ICF, there is Dakota Trails, which is behind Bass Pro Shop, the Cincinnati Mills area, if you're familiar with that. And then Res Care actually does run two smaller 8 home beds in Butler County as well. So I know that was a lot. So just to go back, inclusive housing resources, think landlord. That's who you rent from. And then Res Care is a provider who, if you're looking for waiver, would come and work with your son or daughter in their home and then they leave. They don't own the home.
Okay, their Res Care has 5 ICF homes in Middletown.
Okay.
It sounds like someone put in the chat box there. Great. One of the things I had come across, I know like with Hamilton County, under Hamilton County Resources, Hamilton County DD Resources, they mention a home think tank. Is that for like, have you heard of them, or is that something that's more Hamilton County? It sounds like they had in their resources like a think tank of some sort for home.
Okay. I am not familiar with that. So if someone can tell me a little bit more about it, I would love it because I am not familiar.
It's okay. I'm going to put the link in the chat box. You can look at it. I don't know if it's specific. I'm just putting it in there, since there might be someone from Hamilton County on here, or it might be something that's a little bit more expansive than that. But it's under resources and housing, and then they were referencing as. Let me look here real quick. There's another question. If you have Section 8 or HUD housing, can you still have a roommate? Good question.
Yes, you can. With the typical Section 8 HUD housing. So Patty, again, you and I are living together. The voucher is in one person's name. So say it's in my name, I hold the voucher, but Patty gets to benefit because we live together. But say we have a third friend that we want to move in with us. Our incomes all count as a whole, as the household income, and they have income limits as well to meet the requirements for the voucher. So Patty and I may meet that income limit, just the two of us, but when we bring in a third, it may kick us over that resource limit. So therefore we lose the voucher. So that's something we really have to watch when we're looking at roommates. So yes, technically you can have a roommate if you have a Section 8 voucher. You would benefit whose ever name that's in. It's only in one person's name, and then your roommates benefit. But everybody's income counts as one, so then it can make you lose that voucher if you become over income.
She says thank you. And I'm putting in here the link. Well, I added the link, but there was a little description with that of Hamilton County. Just it looks like it's a resource on some more information to think about, but they were calling it the Home Think Tank, HTT. So um, just wanted to make sure I shared that with those, and just for more information. Some of the information you gather from different, whether you could live in Montgomery County and maybe you hear something in Hamilton County or Butler County or Warren County, like Christy says, that's a conversation you would have with your SSA. So if you don't have a county board or SSA, um, you would want to contact the county board to see about eligibility to get services to achieve to have that SSA, just to see if you're eligible for that information. And if you don't know who to reach out to, I mean, Christy, you know a lot of the county boards, they meet. I mean, there's always meetings going on. They know each other, and she could definitely put you in contact with that proper person to reach out to. Let's see here. There was Home Think Tank is Grace Housing Resource. There are several housing models, examples on it, and videos, families who have tried those models. I highly recommend it for parents. Thank you, Shauna. And the link doesn't seem to be working. Okay. Okay, so the next one was did I understand correctly that you can get SNAP benefit even if they live in your home?
You use now, again, it's been 2 years since I've had an adult caseload. But you used to be able to, correct. As long as your child was, your young adult is 18, it should be able, or he or she should be able to, yes. Now, again, that was 2 years ago, so maybe something has changed. So, but I would follow up with Job and Family Services. The worst thing they can tell you is no. And their application is online. And if they don't meet the requirement, you'll get a letter in the mail. So maybe things have changed, but you used to be able to.
There's also mentioned here, Autism Housing Network is another great resource, not specific to autism. And Warren County, Brittany Connor posted the Warren County, she's the contact for Warren County, she can connect you with their housing um, if you live in Warren County and want to know a little bit about that housing. Um, Christy, you had mentioned the payee,
Hmm.
and you had mentioned, can a county board SSA be a payee?
No,
Okay.
it's conflict of interest. So that's why it's either going to be a family member, a friend, and when I say friend, hopefully like an adult, not like a peer friend, someone who's responsible because as a payee, they're responsible for paying your bills and things. So that's why if you're not going to choose an agency, you want it to be someone that you trust, so that way you don't lose your housing. Um, and just on a sidebar real fast, Warren County has someone that does, what I do. And her and I meet often. So say you're currently in Butler County, but you're interested in moving to Warren County, or vice versa. You're in Warren County, you're interested in coming to Butler County. Lori and I talk a lot and we'll share resources, and we're trying to build that with other counties. So also if you're thinking about that transition, like Patty said, we talk a lot, we have connections. So and we want that transition to be as smooth as possible. So
Yeah, that's all wonderful to know. Um, in part of Christie's presentation, so in January, we're going to be talking about independent living and support groups. I want to make sure that having a support group, whether it's the autism, there's autism connections, there's Down syndrome, group, just different groups that help with a specific disability, but most of them are not inclusive for that disability. So like if your child has a diagnosis, you can still reach out to these groups. I think it was mentioned about Autism Housing Network. They're not specific to whether your child has autism or not, or if it says a Down syndrome. They're not specific to that. They will help you with whichever disability your child may have or has been diagnosed with. We will be talking about assistive technology. It's amazing. You mentioned assistive technology. That's hard for me to wrap my tongue around, but um, it's amazing how far technology has come. I mean, it's always changing. Uh, we heard several times from different groups that encourage assistive technology, and everything from what Alexa to the tablets and all the things that they can do with that, plus group agencies that can set up your home and still remain private. They'll set up your home just to help with, you know, locking doors, or if, just different aspects. Does your child get up in the middle of the night and wander? They can pick up on some of that. So there's so many different things that assistive technology can do. We'll be talking about budgeting as well. We have a group, somebody talking about budgeting. That is one of the biggest hurdles in our family in the sense for helping with our son. And in the budgeting part, just understanding the numbers, and so having someone to be able to help, like I was asking about payee, who helps? You have, we'll be talking about it later in the year, a trust, you have a trustee, do you have the payee, do you have a family member? There's so many decisions to think about, it takes a lot of planning. Um, and then we'll also have Amy Duncan talking about building life skills. You had mentioned about starting to build those life skills, the laundry, cooking. you know, those are cooking, I think, cooking or budgeting, I think are two big hurdles, because cooking, of course, you have heat, you have knives, you have all that kind of stuff, the coordination, eye-hand coordination for that, and then budgeting, just the understanding of it. Um, and then in March, we're going to be talking about funding and Social Security. So we're going to try to touch on some of these different things that Christy had talked about in her or touched on in her presentation. We'll go into more in depth, um, but it's always good to know whatever, what has been touched here in this session, you can take it back to your SSA. And again, if you don't have a connection with the Disabilities County Board of Developmental Disabilities, you know, Christy's a good contact for that. Um, Somebody was asking about your role there in the chat box, Christy. I don't know if you can put your information there or if you want to just say what it is.
Sure. I'm the residential options coordinator. So I'm the Lori Carr of Butler County.
And each county, I'm not sure that they all have a housing type person, but you would have to ask the SSA. But several counties that we have that I have talked with, a lot of them do have someone that's another Christy in their within their services. So that would be, going back to your county board and saying, hey, we're looking at maybe my son's, maybe in 5 years they want to live independently. How can we get to that goal? What are our choices? And start getting that open conversation going. Also, you had mentioned advocacy groups. I think like Butler County is Speak Up. I strongly recommend you getting your child involved in an advocacy group. And why is that? Because they talk about these things like, well, voting is one. They talk about going to the bank. I mean, okay, you're going to the bank, talking to a teller. They talk about these things of advocating for yourself. Another tongue twister for me. But it's great to get involved with the county board, find out what their services are, and find these groups to be involved with. I can't off the top of my head remember all the names, but I know Butler County is Speak Up. Um, I'm trying to think if anybody's on here from Montgomery County or Greene County. And then Brittany, your advocacy group. I don't know if you can type it in the chat box or not, but every county they're all not the same name. They're all different. It's a very, and they usually meet about once a month. Voices of Warren County. Okay. Does anybody have any questions that came to mind regarding your concerns about your child moving into their own place? I would think, Chrissy, if I'm, you can correct me anytime I'm wrong here, but I would like for cooking, you might be able to get through, like you mentioned, waivers or something. You might be able to get a provider to help with some of that. I know there is cooking classes out there for kids with disabilities. There's like some of these kind of activities going on. Healthy Habits Cook Club is one that's in the Dayton area. But providers can help with many of these challenging areas, correct?
They can. And if your son or daughter has a waiver, there are also home delivered meals. That's a program available. Home delivered meals, that's another service that's provided. So when we're looking at staffing, when we're looking at potential transportation, we just have to be sure there's enough funds for everything. So even though that's a service out there, we would have to see how can that fit into your other needs as well. But there are programs out there like that.
One of those words, providers, it took me a while to wrap my head around what a provider was when we were getting involved with services. And we'll also be talking about that later in the year, but they're there, like you said, with the waivers, that they're there to help. They do so many different jobs, anything from helping with employment to um, just life skills kind of services.
And there's so many. There's an independent provider who's just like one person, and then you have an agency, and each one is it's pros and cons to each. An independent provider is great because it's that one-on-one and it's truly the person, but they have lives too. So if they get sick or they're going on vacation or they're going to have a surgery and they can't work, then there is no backup. Pro to agency is if there's a situation like that, you have a staff that normally is your routine staff, but they're going to be off for a little bit. An agency hopefully then can send someone in to replace. So there's pros and cons to each.
Now, I have a question too. As a parent, you have a child with a disability. Maybe have a wheelchair situation, or they struggle with, if you would say, steps or getting around. Now, if we as a parent, and this can be whatever county's on here. If you're on here, a staff from any of the other counties, you can put your contact information in the chat box. But if I'm going out to look for a home, but we find something, but maybe we need a ramp installed. Maybe we need, grab bars or something. Is that solely through a waiver situation, or does some of the counties, I mean, I know you can't speak for every county, but does Butler County, do they support like helping to create an environment that your child maybe can move into if it's not there? You know what I mean? Like a ramp type situation.
Absolutely. I think those through that planning process. So it's going to be those things that we look at, before you rent the home. Like, is this a good fit for you? Um, a waiver, if your son or daughter has a waiver, there is some equipment, things like that that can be done. Home modification. It was the big fancy word I was thinking of. There's home modifications that can be paid through that waiver. As far as now, this is Butler County. Again, each county works differently. As far as Butler County, we're going to ask questions of course, need, service, things like that, health and safety. But we're also going to look at, is this placement long term? Even though you're renting it, is this somewhere that you're going to be for a long period of time? Because if it's somewhere that you're only going to be for a couple months, we can't keep, renovating. Plus, if it's a private landlord, we have to ask their permission. Maybe not all landlords are willing to modify their rental to accommodate your needs. So there's a lot of questions around there that you'll go through that process with your SSA.
Very good points, to just consider and think about. Does anybody have any questions? I think I got through the chat box, all the questions there, and I'm going to stop the recording here in a minute just in case you didn't want to put a question out there, you don't want to type, because I know how that is, especially if you have a long question. But I think I got everybody's um, questions or comments that were out there that I was looking at. So, okay. Yeah. So I'm going to go and close the recording so we can ask questions out, just maybe have a discussion. But before I close the recording, again, thank you, Christy, for explaining, giving us some basic 101s on housing. Hopefully we shared enough resources here too to get parents thinking about, depending on where their child is in the spectrum of transition in that whole decision making, what can we add, to our meetings, like whether it be an IEP or when you get out of high school, there's an ISP. So that was a surprise to me. When my son graduated, I'm like, okay, what? And someone called me and said, we got to set up an ISP. I'm like, what's an ISP? And I had no idea that this next step was coming, but it's another way of making these plans for your child, and as they graduate, you'd be looking at this ISP planning for your child, and so this would be also talked about during that. So I'm going to close the recording. So 1 second, so everybody hold tight, and then we can ask, have an open discussion here with Christy as well. So thank you.